The auction block had never felt colder beneath Lena Katherine's bare feet, though perhaps that was because January snow had crusted between the wooden planks, and her skin had gone numb hours ago. She stood with her shoulders pulled back despite the chains at her wrists, ignoring the way men's eyes crawled over the scars that decorated her arms like a map of suffering, white lines against skin that had once been unmarked before the Apache raid that killed her family, and left her wandering the Colorado wilderness for 3 brutal weeks before different captors found her. The auctioneer's voice cut through the frozen air of Julesburg, his breath forming clouds as he listed her supposed qualities to the crowd of men huddled in their thick coats. It was 1878, and the railroad had brought all manner of people to this corner of Colorado, not all of them good. Lena had learned that the hard way when the trappers who found her half dead in the snow had seen profit instead of a soul in need of rescue. They had fed her just enough to keep her alive, given her just enough warmth to prevent frostbite, and now they were selling her labor to the highest bidder under the thin pretense of an indenture contract that everyone knew was slavery in different words. "She is strong," the auctioneer said, grabbing her arm and displaying it like merchandise. "Survived weeks in the wilderness, can work hard, young enough to be useful for years." Lena kept her eyes fixed on the horizon where the South Platte River cut through the landscape, refusing to look at the men who might decide her fate. She had survived the Apache attack that killed her parents and younger brother. She had survived the frozen wilderness eating pine bark and snow. She had survived the trappers' rough treatment. She would survive this too, though the how of it remained a mystery that made her chest tight with fear she refused to show. $50, someone called from the back. 60, another voice added without enthusiasm. Nathan Xavier pushed his way through the crowd, his jaw set hard beneath 3 days of stubble. He had come to town for supplies, not for this, but the sight of the young woman on the auction block had stopped him cold. Not because of the scars that marked her arms and neck, visible even in the conservative dress they had given her, but because of the way she held herself, defiant, unbroken. Her dark hair hung in a braid over one shoulder, and even from a distance, he could see the intelligence and determination in her hazel eyes. She was perhaps 20 or 21, he guessed, and she looked like she would rather die than surrender whatever core of self she still possessed. He had seen that look before in his own mirror, after the war had taken everything from him except his horse and his willingness to keep breathing. He had built a ranch from nothing in the 5 years since, carving a life out of harsh land through sheer stubbornness. He did not need help. He definitely did not need complications. But something in the way this woman stood in chains in the snow made him think of his younger sister, dead now these 10 years, who had faced her own death with similar courage. $100, Nathan heard himself say, his voice carrying across the crowd. Heads turned. That was more than twice the going rate for contracted labor, even skilled labor. The auctioneer's eyes lit with greed. $100 to the gentleman in the black hat. Do I hear 110? Silence fell. $100 was a fortune to most of these men. Nathan waited, part of him hoping someone would outbid him and spare him from whatever madness had seized him. But the crowd remained quiet, and the auctioneer's gavel came down with finality. Sold to the gentleman in black for $100. Nathan counted out the money from the roll he kept in his inside pocket, money he had been planning to use for lumber and nails to repair his barn roof before the next snow. The auctioneer handed him a paper that made his stomach turn, a contract of indenture that gave him 7 years of this woman's labor in exchange for room, board, and basic care. 7 years of what amounted to ownership of another human being, no matter what pretty words they dressed it in. He approached the auction block as they removed her chains. Up close, she was even more striking than he had realized. Her eyes met his without flinching, reading him the same way he was reading her, both of them sizing up the situation they had found themselves in. "Can you ride?" Nathan asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Yes, her voice was hoarse, probably from the cold and lack of use, but steady. "Then let us get out of this town." He pulled off his heavy coat and held it out to her. "You are freezing." Lena stared at the coat, then at the man offering it. He was tall, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that held something she had not expected to see. Respect. Not pity, not lust, not the calculating assessment of property, but simple human respect. Her hands shook as she reached for the coat, though whether from cold or from the sudden, overwhelming realization that she was leaving the auction block alive, and with someone who had kind eyes, she could not say. "Thank you," she managed, pulling the coat around her shoulders. It smelled like leather and wood smoke and horse, good honest smells that made something in her chest unclench slightly. Nathan led her to where his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, waited at the hitching post. He had a supply wagon too, already half loaded with the purchases he had made earlier that morning. He helped her onto the wagon seat with a hand under her elbow, careful not to touch more than necessary, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They were a mile out of Julesburg before either of them spoke again. The landscape stretched white and brown around them, broken by occasional stands of cottonwood along the river. The sky hung low and gray, promising more snow before nightfall. "My name is Nathan Xavier," he said finally, keeping his eyes on the road. "I have a ranch about 10 miles west of here. Small operation, just cattle and some horses. It is not much, but it is honest work and honest living." "Lena Katherine," she replied, her voice stronger now that warmth was seeping back into her bones. "And I should tell you that I will not be anyone's property, contract or no contract. I will work for my keep and I will work hard, but I am not a slave." "Good." Nathan glanced at her, and something that might have been approval flickered in his expression. "Because I am not interested in owning anyone. That contract is going into my fire the minute we get home. You can stay and work for wages, or you can leave once the weather clears. Your choice." Lena studied his profile, looking for the trap she was certain existed. No one spent $100 out of pure charity. No one bought a woman at auction and then offered to burn the contract without expecting something in return. But his face remained open, honest, tired in the way of men who worked from dawn to dark and fell into bed too exhausted for schemes. "Why did you buy me?" she asked. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins as Copper pulled the wagon over a frozen rut. "You reminded me of someone," he said finally. "And I suppose I could not stand by and watch while you ended up with someone who would not see you as human. I know that probably does not make much sense, and I am sure you think I have ulterior motives, and I do not blame you for that. But I promise you, on whatever honor I have left, that you are safe with me." Something in the simple sincerity of his words made Lena's throat tight. She had not cried when the Apache attacked her family. She had not cried during the endless frozen nights in the wilderness. She had not cried when the trappers had bartered her like livestock. But now, sitting on a wagon beside a stranger who had just promised her safety without asking for anything in return, tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously and looked out at the landscape instead. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, needing to change the subject before she did something embarrassing like break down entirely. Nathan seemed to understand. He described his 160 acres, the small cabin he had built himself, the barn that needed its roof repaired, the 40 head of cattle he ran, and the 6 horses he kept. He talked about the isolation, the hard work, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. He did not mention the loneliness, but Lena heard it in the spaces between his words. By the time they reached the ranch, full dark had fallen and fresh snow was beginning to drift down. The cabin was small but solid, with smoke rising from the stone chimney. A barn stood nearby, and Lena could see the promised damaged roof, even in the dim light from the rising moon. Nathan helped her down from the wagon and led her into the cabin while Copper stood patiently, clearly accustomed to waiting while his owner got things settled. Inside, a fire burned in the hearth, and the single room was surprisingly clean and well organized for a bachelor's dwelling. A bed stood in one corner, a table and 2 chairs near the hearth, shelves with dishes and supplies along one wall, and a trunk that probably held clothes and personal items. "You take the bed," Nathan said immediately, moving to the fire to build it up. "I will sleep in the barn until I can build you a proper room. There is a privacy screen over there if you need to change. I have a shirt and some trousers that might fit you well enough for working, and tomorrow we can figure out getting you some proper clothes." "You are not sleeping in the barn," Lena said firmly. "It is the middle of winter. You will freeze. I have slept in worse." "So have I, and I am telling you it is foolish." She moved to stand by the fire, letting its heat sink into her bones. "You have a perfectly good cabin. I am not going to force you into the barn. We are both adults. We can share the space without impropriety." Nathan turned to look at her, and for the first time, something like amusement crossed his face. "You are bossy for someone who was standing in chains an hour ago." "I was not bossy enough before, which is how I ended up in chains." Lena met his gaze steadily. "I intend to correct that error. Now, I assume you need to tend to your horse and the livestock before the snow gets worse. While you do that, I will make us something to eat. Do you have supplies? In the wagon and in the pantry?" Nathan shook his head, but he was almost smiling now. "There is bread and some dried beef, potatoes in the cellar outside the door, coffee on the shelf. Then go. I can manage a simple meal." Nathan grabbed a lantern and headed back out into the snow, leaving Lena alone in his cabin. She stood still for a moment, letting the reality of her situation sink in. She was free. Or at least, she was as free as a woman could be in 1878 Colorado, alone with a stranger who had bought her at auction. But Nathan Xavier had kind eyes and gentle hands, and he had promised to burn the contract that bound her to him. That had to count for something. She found the pantry well stocked for a bachelor household and set about making a meal. It felt strange and wonderful to have purpose again, to be doing something as normal as cooking instead of huddling in fear or stumbling through snow-covered wilderness. Her hands remembered the familiar motions, and by the time Nathan returned 40 minutes later, stamping snow from his boots, she had potatoes frying in a pan, coffee boiling, and the bread sliced with butter from the small cold box. They ate in comfortable silence, both too hungry and too tired for much conversation. When the meal was finished, Nathan pulled out the contract and held it to the fire without ceremony. They watched it burn together, the legal words that had bound her turning to ash and smoke. "Tomorrow we will figure out the details," Nathan said, banking the fire for the night. "Wages, work expectations, all of it. But tonight you should just rest. God knows you have earned it." He spread blankets on the floor near the hearth, making himself a bed despite Lena's protests. She was too exhausted to argue further, and the thought of sleeping in an actual bed, warm and safe, was too tempting to resist. She changed behind the privacy screen into one of Nathan's shirts, which hung to her knees like a nightgown and climbed under the quilts. Sleep should have come easily, but instead, she found herself staring at the ceiling beams, listening to Nathan's quiet breathing from his pallet by the fire. So much had changed in a single day. This morning she had been property, tomorrow uncertain and terrifying. Now she was lying in a warm bed in a solid cabin with a man who had shown her more kindness in a few hours than she had experienced in months. "Nathan," she said quietly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you, for what you did today, for all of it. You do not need to thank me for basic decency." "Yes, I do, because it was not basic and it was not common." She paused, then added, "I will earn my keep, I promise you that. Whatever you paid for me, whatever this costs you, I will work until it is repaid. Lena." His voice was firm but gentle. "You do not owe me anything. Sleep now. Tomorrow is soon enough for plans and work." She closed her eyes and, surprisingly, sleep did come. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena Katherine felt safe. Morning came early on a ranch, and Lena woke to find Nathan already up, the fire rebuilt and coffee brewing. He had left the shirt and trousers he had mentioned folded on the chair, and she dressed quickly behind the screen. The clothes were too large, but she rolled up the sleeves and cuffs and cinched the pants with a piece of rope he had thoughtfully included. Nathan's expression when she emerged was carefully neutral, but she saw approval in his eyes. "They will do until we can get you something better," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. "We need to talk about what happens next." They sat at the table, and Nathan laid out his situation with straightforward honesty. The ranch was just starting to turn a real profit. He worked from dawn to dark managing the cattle, maintaining the property, training horses to sell. He could use help, genuine help, especially with the horses, which took time and patience he often did not have when he was also managing everything else. If she wanted to stay, he would pay her standard ranch hand wages, $25 a month plus room and board. She would have her own room once he built it, which he could start on as soon as the weather cleared. She would work hard, but he would never ask her to do anything he would not do himself. "And if I want to leave," Lena asked, "then I will take you to the next town or wherever you want to go and give you enough money to get started somewhere else." Nathan met her eyes steadily. "I mean what I said yesterday. You are free to choose." Lena thought about her options. She had no family left, no friends in Colorado, no money, and no prospects. She could go to a city, try to find work as a seamstress or a laundress or a cook, but she had always preferred open spaces to crowded streets. She could try to make her way back east, but to what? The small Ohio farm where she had grown up was gone, sold after her parents died. She had no ties anywhere, which meant she was equally free everywhere. Or she could stay here, on this isolated ranch with this quiet man who had shown her unexpected kindness. She could learn ranching, earn honest wages, build something new from the ashes of her old life. It was not safe exactly. Nothing was safe for a woman alone, but it felt more right than any of the alternatives. "I will stay," she said. "At least for now, through the winter certainly. We can reassess in the spring." Relief crossed Nathan's face so quickly she almost missed it. "Good," he said simply. "Then let me show you around and we can figure out where you will be most useful." The ranch tour took most of the morning. Nathan showed her the cattle in their winter pasture, hardy beasts with thick coats who watched them with mild curiosity. He showed her the horses, including Copper and 5 others in various stages of training. He showed her the chicken coop, which needed mucking and had 6 hens who provided eggs. He showed her the barn, the equipment shed, the root cellar, the spring that provided their water. Lena absorbed it all, asking questions that made Nathan look at her with increasing respect. She had grown up on a farm, she explained, and while cattle ranching was different from crop farming, the basic principles of animal husbandry and land management were the same. She knew how to work, how to push through exhaustion and discomfort to get necessary tasks done. "I am best with horses," she said as they stood in the barn, watching a young mare nose at her hand. "My father raised them before. I can ride, train, handle them for shoeing and veterinary work. If you want me to focus there, I can. Or I can do whatever needs doing." "Horses then," Nathan decided. "I have 3 that need serious training before I can sell them and 2 more coming along. If you can work with them, get them ready for buyers, that would free me up for the other work considerably. We can split the other chores as makes sense." They fell into a routine with surprising ease. Lena rose with Nathan at dawn, helped with the morning feeding and the basic chores, then spent her days working with the horses while Nathan managed the cattle and the endless repairs and maintenance a ranch required. They cooked together in the evenings, taking turns or working side by side in the small kitchen space. They talked, carefully at first, sharing small pieces of their histories. Lena learned that Nathan had fought for the Union in the war, though he did not talk much about it. His family had owned a small farm in Ohio, not far from where Lena had grown up, though they had never crossed paths. His parents and sister had died of fever while he was away fighting. He had returned to find everything sold for debts, and no reason to stay, so he had drifted west, working ranches and saving every penny until he could buy this land and start over. Nathan learned that Lena had been traveling with her family to Denver when the Apache attack came. They had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught between warring factions in the endless conflicts that plagued the frontier. Her father had been killed trying to defend them. Her mother and brother had died in the initial attack. Lena had run, survived through luck and stubbornness, and then had the misfortune to be found by men who saw opportunity instead of obligation in her suffering. They did not share the deep wounds, not at first. Those came later, in smaller moments. The night, Lena woke screaming from a nightmare and found Nathan at her bedside with a lamp and a calm voice talking her back to reality. The evening Nathan's hands shook while loading his rifle before riding out to check on a possible predator, and Lena quietly took the gun and loaded it herself, understanding without words that sometimes the war came back to him unbidden. Trust built slowly between them, careful and deliberate as the room Nathan was constructing in the barn, which he had decided would be warmer and more practical than trying to expand the cabin. He worked on it in spare moments, insulating it properly, building a small stove, making it comfortable. It was nearly finished when February arrived with a blizzard that trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. The storm hit without much warning, the wind rising from a whisper to a howl in the span of an hour. Nathan had just enough time to get the livestock secured and extra wood brought in before visibility dropped to nothing. He and Lena found themselves cabin-bound with nothing to do but wait it out. The first day they occupied themselves with small tasks, mending clothes and tack, organizing supplies, cleaning everything that could be cleaned. The second day they played cards with a battered deck Nathan produced from his trunk, and Lena discovered that the quiet cowboy had a competitive streak and a dry sense of humor that made her laugh more than she had laughed in years. The third day, with the storm still raging outside and the cabin feeling smaller by the hour, Nathan taught her to dance. It started as a joke. Lena had been restless, pacing the small space like a caged animal, and Nathan had said, "If you are going to wear a path in my floor, you might as well do it with some grace." He had hummed a waltz, something from before the war, and held out his hand. Lena had stared at him. "I do not know how to dance," Then you should learn. Every person should know how to waltz. She had let him pull her into the basic frame, feeling awkward and self-conscious in her borrowed clothes with her work-roughened hands in his. But Nathan was patient, counting the steps, guiding her through the turns in the small space between the table and the bed. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, his voice low and steady while the wind screamed outside. They stumbled at first, laughing when Lena stepped on his feet or when they nearly crashed into the furniture. But gradually she found the rhythm, let herself relax into his lead. They danced to nothing but Nathan's humming and the howl of the wind, around and around the small cabin, and something shifted between them. Lena became acutely aware of Nathan's hand on her waist, the strength in his frame, the way he smelled like pine soap and wood smoke. She looked up and found him watching her with an expression she had not seen before, something warm and wondering that made her breath catch. Nathan saw the scars on her wrists and arms, visible even through the shirt sleeves she had rolled down. He saw the way her dark hair had escaped its braid and curled around her face. He saw the intelligence in her hazel eyes, the strength that had kept her alive through horrors that would have broken someone else, the surprising softness that she was only beginning to let him see. He saw a woman who was beautiful not despite her scars but because of everything they represented: survival, resilience, the refusal to surrender. They stopped moving, though the pretense of the waltz remained, his hand still at her waist, hers still on his shoulder. The cabin felt very warm despite the storm raging outside. "Lena," Nathan said quietly. "Yes, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that it changes nothing about our arrangement. You are still free to stay or go as you choose, and I will never make you uncomfortable or pressure you in any way." Her heart was pounding. "Tell me, I am falling in love with you." The words came out rough, honest. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you on that auction block, standing there like a queen despite everything. And these weeks of living with you, working with you, learning who you are, it has only gotten stronger. I love your strength and your stubbornness and your laugh and the way you gentle horses. I love that you survived when survival should have been impossible. I love that you are kind without being soft, fierce without being cruel. I just love you, and I needed you to know, but I do not expect anything in return. I just could not keep pretending I did not feel it." Lena's eyes had filled with tears while he spoke. "You ridiculous man," she whispered. "You beautiful, ridiculous, wonderful man." "Is that a good ridiculous or a bad ridiculous?" "Good." She laughed, the sound halfway to a sob. "Very good, because I am falling in love with you too, and I have been so frightened of it. I thought I was broken, Nathan. I thought the things that happened had destroyed whatever part of me could feel things like this. But then you took me in and gave me back my freedom and treated me like I mattered, and you made me feel human again. You made me feel like maybe I could have a future that was more than just surviving." Nathan's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "You were never broken. Hurt, yes. Scarred, yes. But never broken. You are the strongest person I have ever met." "Then kiss me," Lena said. "Please, I want to choose this. I want to choose you." He kissed her like she was precious, like he had been thinking about it for weeks and wanted to memorize every second. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, and when Lena leaned into him, winding her arms around his neck, he made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the storm outside seemed like nothing compared to the warmth building between them. When they finally broke apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably talk about what this means," he said, sounding dazed. "It means I am staying," Lena replied. "Not as your employee, as your partner if you will have me, in the ranch, in life, in everything." "Yes," He kissed her again, quick and fierce. Yes, absolutely yes. Lena Katherine, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I know, she said simply, because she did know. Nathan Xavier was a man of his word, steady and true. Whatever they built together would be built on that foundation of honesty and respect. The storm blew itself out overnight, and they woke to a world transformed by snow, everything white and clean and new. They went out together to tend the animals, to dig out paths, to assess the damage, which was minimal. The cattle had weathered the storm fine in their shelter. The horses were restless but healthy. The barn roof had held despite its worn patches over the following weeks. As winter loosened its grip and early spring began to hint at arrival, Nathan and Lena settled into their new reality. They were courting, though it was unlike any courtship either of them had heard of. They worked side by side during the day, shared a cabin at night with Nathan still sleeping near the hearth and Lena in the bed, though now there were goodnight kisses and morning embraces that made the separation feel increasingly unnecessary. "We should get married," Nathan said one evening in late March as they sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. "I know it has not been long, but I am certain." "Are you?" "I am certain," Lena agreed, "but I want to do it properly. I want a dress and a preacher and something that feels real and permanent, not a rushed ceremony because we are worried about propriety. Then we will do it properly." Nathan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "We will go into Julesburg next week, order you a dress, talk to the preacher, set a date. We can invite the neighbors, have a real celebration. I want everyone to know that you are choosing me as much as I am choosing you." They rode into Julesburg on a warm April morning, the prairie coming alive with new grass and wildflowers. It was Lena's first time back since the auction, and she felt Nathan tense beside her as they approached the town, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle on his saddle. "I am fine," she assured him. "Those men cannot hurt me anymore. They have no power over me." Still, he stayed close as they went about their errands. The dressmaker was a practical woman named Mrs. Henderson, who asked no questions about the scars on Lena's arms when she took measurements, simply noted them as she would any other physical characteristic. They selected a simple but elegant design in ivory fabric, with lace at the collar and sleeves. It would be ready in 6 weeks, Mrs. Henderson promised. The preacher, Reverend Thomas, was equally pragmatic. He agreed to perform the ceremony in 8 weeks' time, giving them time to prepare and for word to spread to the scattered ranches and homesteads in the area. He asked the usual questions about their intentions and their faith, seemed satisfied with their answers, and sent them off with his blessing and a reminder that marriage was hard work that required commitment and grace. They made one more stop before leaving town, at the land office. Nathan had been saving money toward buying another 80 acres adjacent to his property, land with good water and grazing. Standing at the counter, he changed his plan. "I want to put both our names on the deed," he told the clerk. "Nathan Xavier and Lena Katherine, equal ownership." The clerk blinked. "Sir, that is highly unusual. When you marry, your property will become jointly held anyway under common law." "I do not care about common law. I want it in writing that this land belongs to both of us equally. Can you do that or not?" The clerk could, though he clearly thought Nathan was a fool. But Nathan just smiled as he and Lena both signed the papers that made them co-owners of 160 acres of Colorado ranch land. "There," he said as they walked out into the sunshine. "Now, no matter what happens, you have something that is yours. No one can take it from you." Lena stopped in the middle of the street and kissed him, not caring who saw. "How did I get so lucky?" she murmured against his lips. I think we both got lucky." Nathan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Now let us go home and start building our life." The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy and bright. Word had spread among their scattered neighbors, and people Lena had never met stopped by to introduce themselves and offer help or gifts. She learned that frontier communities took care of their own, that the isolation that could be harsh also created bonds of necessity and kindness. Nathan's room in the barn was finished and sat empty. They had not discussed it, but both understood that once they were married, Lena would move into Nathan's bed in the cabin, and the barn room would serve some other purpose. The thought made Lena nervous and excited in equal measure. She was 22 years old and had never been with a man. She trusted Nathan completely, but the vulnerability required still frightened her. Nathan seemed to sense her nervousness without her saying anything. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, his arm around her shoulders and her head on his chest, he said, "You know we do not have to do anything you are not ready for. Marriage or no marriage, we move at your pace, always." "I know." She tilted her head to look up at him. "And I am ready." "Nervous, but ready. I want all of it, Nathan. The partnership, the intimacy, the life together. I want to build something with you that is ours. Then that is what we will do." He kissed the top of her head. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, building something good." The wedding took place on a bright June morning in 1878, with nearly 40 people gathered at the small church in Julesburg. Lena wore her ivory dress and carried wildflowers that Nathan had picked at dawn. Nathan wore a new suit that he had bought for the occasion, his hair trimmed and his face clean-shaven. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came. And when Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at their ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food and music provided by the community. People danced and ate and told stories as the sun arced across the sky. Lena found herself pulled into conversation after conversation, welcomed into a community she had not realized she was joining. These people knew she had been sold at auction. They knew about the scars and the suffering, but none of it mattered to them except as history that had brought her here. As the sun set and the party showed no signs of slowing, Nathan found Lena talking with Mrs. Henderson and quietly took her hand. "May I steal my wife?" he asked with exaggerated formality. "Your wife," Lena repeated, testing the words. "I like how that sounds." They slipped away from the celebration, walking toward the barn and the privacy it offered. Their guests would party until dawn probably, and no one would notice or care that the bride and groom had disappeared. That was frontier courtesy, celebrating with enthusiasm, and then knowing when to give newlyweds their space. Inside the cabin, Nathan lit lamps and built up the fire despite the warm night, giving himself something to do with his hands. Lena stood in the center of the room, her ivory dress glowing in the lamplight, and watched him with affection and amusement. "Nathan Xavier," she said. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," he admitted, turning to face her. "I want this to be perfect for you, and I am afraid I will do something wrong." "It is already perfect." Lena crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "Because it is you and me, and we chose this. That is all that matters." They undressed each other slowly, carefully, learning skin and scars in the lamplight. Lena had been afraid that Nathan might find her scars ugly, but the way he kissed each one, reverent and gentle, told her everything she needed to know. He thought she was beautiful, scars and all. He saw her, truly saw her, and loved what he saw. Their lovemaking was tender and awkward and wonderful, fumbling at times as they learned each other, but filled with love and trust. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Nathan's bed, which was now their bed, and talked quietly until sleep claimed them both. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered as Nathan and Lena worked it together, equal partners in every sense. They expanded their herd, added more horses, built a better barn. They survived droughts and harsh winters and the everyday challenges of frontier life. They made friends among their neighbors and became pillars of their small community. In the spring of 1880, Lena gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Nathan Xavier. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and from his first breath, he owned both their hearts completely. Nathan proved to be a natural father, patient and loving, never too busy to hold his son or help Lena with the endless needs of an infant. 18 months later, their daughter arrived, Lena Katherine Xavier, dark-haired like her mother and fierce from birth. Lena had been terrified during her second pregnancy, afraid something would go wrong, but Nathan had been her rock, steady and sure. He had delivered Caroline himself when the midwife could not get to them in time during a spring storm, and Lena had never loved him more than in that moment when he placed their squalling daughter in her arms and kissed them both with shaking hands. The children grew strong and happy on the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with chores as soon as they were able. Lena taught them reading and writing and arithmetic at the kitchen table, using the books Nathan ordered from Denver. Nathan taught them ranch work and horsemanship and how to be good, honest people. In 1885, they added a second story to the cabin, giving the children proper bedrooms and creating space for the life that continued to expand around them. The ranch now ran 200 head of cattle across land they had gradually acquired, and Nathan's reputation as a horse trainer had spread, bringing buyers from as far as Denver and even Kansas. Lena stood on the porch one evening that summer, watching Nathan and James, now 5 years old, work with a young horse in the corral. Caroline, 3, sat on the fence, offering her own commentary on their technique. The sun painted everything golden, and Lena felt the weight of contentment settle over her like a blanket. It had been 7 years since the auction block. 7 years since she had stood in the snow, scarred and scared and certain her life was effectively over. She had been so wrong. Her life had not ended that day. It had begun. Nathan looked up and caught her watching. He smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart skip, and she smiled back. Later, after the children were in bed and the ranch was quiet, they would sit together on the porch as they did most nights, his arm around her shoulders and her head on his chest, talking about everything and nothing. They would make plans and share dreams and simply be together. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from pain and hope. By 1890, the Xavier Ranch was one of the most successful in the region. Nathan and Lena had established a reputation for fairness and quality, and they employed 2 full-time ranch hands to help manage the expanded operation. James, now 10, was already showing signs of becoming an excellent rancher himself, serious and hardworking like his father. Caroline, at 8, had her mother's gift with horses and her father's steady determination. In the spring of that year, Lena discovered she was pregnant again. She was 34 now, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Nathan worried constantly, hovering and fussing until Lena gently but firmly told him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. But she loved him for it, for the way he cared, for the way he still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Their third child, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth Xavier, was born on a clear October morning with the aspens turning gold on the hillsides. She was tiny and perfect, and when Nathan held her for the first time, Tears streamed down his face unashamed. 3, he said wonderingly. We have 3 beautiful children. We do. Lena touched Rose's downy head, marveling as always at the miracle of new life. We built this, Nathan, this family, this life. We built it from nothing. We built it from love, Nathan corrected, leaning down to kiss Lena's forehead. That was never nothing. The children adored their baby sister, and Caroline especially took her role as big sister seriously, always wanting to help with Rose's care. James was more reserved in his affection, but Lena often caught him watching the baby with soft eyes when he thought no one was looking. As the years rolled on, the Xavier family became a fixture in the community. Nathan served on the school board when Julesburg finally got a proper school building in 1892. Lena organized a women's group that met monthly to share skills and support each other through the challenges of frontier life. They opened their home to travelers and new settlers, offering hospitality and advice to those trying to establish themselves. In 1895, when James was 15, he asked his father if he could start managing part of the ranch himself. Nathan agreed, setting aside 40 acres for James to run, with help and oversight but increasing independence. It was a test and a teaching opportunity, and James threw himself into it with the determination that was his birthright. Caroline, at 13, was already being courted by boys from neighboring ranches, much to Nathan's consternation. Lena found it hilarious, watching her husband try to intimidate teenage boys with limited success. Caroline had inherited her mother's independence and her father's stubbornness, and she made it clear that she would choose her own path in her own time. Thank you very much. Rose, at 5, was the sunshine of the family, cheerful and curious and utterly fearless. She followed her siblings and parents everywhere, asking endless questions and getting into everything. She reminded Lena of herself at that age, before the Apache attack, when the world had seemed full of possibility instead of danger. One evening in late 1895, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Nathan said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not gone to town that day? If someone else had bought you?" "No," Lena said honestly, "because it did not happen that way. You did go to town. You did buy me. You did see me as human when I had almost forgotten I was. Everything that came after, everything good we have built, comes from that choice you made." "We made," Nathan corrected. "You chose to stay. You chose to trust me. You chose to build this life with me. That took as much courage as anything I did. Then we are both brave." Lena snuggled closer to him, comfortable in his arms after 17 years of marriage. "And we are both blessed. That we are." Nathan kissed her temple. "Every single day I wake up grateful that I found you. Or that you found me, however we want to look at it. We found each other," Lena said. "That is how I prefer to think of it. 2 broken people who were not as broken as they thought, finding each other and becoming whole." The new century arrived with celebration and hope. The Xaviers threw a New Year's party at their ranch, inviting everyone they knew to ring in 1900 together. As midnight approached, Lena stood surrounded by her family and friends, watching Nathan laugh at something one of their neighbors said, watching her children dance with joy at staying up so late, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the life she had been given. When the clock struck 12 and everyone cheered and kissed and wished each other well, Nathan found Lena and pulled her into his arms. "Happy New Century, Mrs. Xavier," he said, his gray eyes warm in the lamplight. "Happy New Century, Mr. Xavier," she replied, going up on her toes to kiss him. "Here is to the next 100 years. I do not think we will make it quite that long. Then here is to making the most of however long we have." They did exactly that. As the years passed, the Xavier Ranch continued to thrive. James married a neighboring rancher's daughter in 1903 and brought her to live in a house he built on his section of the land. Caroline, true to her independent nature, went to Denver to study veterinary medicine, one of the first women in Colorado to do so. She returned in 1907 with her degree and her new husband, a veterinarian she had met at school, and together they established a practice serving the ranches and farms of the region. Rose, the baby of the family, surprised everyone by developing a passion for photography. She apprenticed with a photographer in Denver and eventually set up her own studio in Julesburg, documenting the changing face of the West as the frontier era gave way to the modern age. Nathan and Lena watched their children build their own lives with pride and joy. They became grandparents multiple times over, their home filled with the noise and chaos of grandchildren every Sunday when the family gathered for dinner. The ranch that had started as 160 acres and a small cabin had grown into a compound of buildings and a thriving operation that supported multiple families. In 1910, on their 32nd wedding anniversary, Nathan took Lena back to Julesburg to the spot where the auction block had once stood. It was gone now, torn down years earlier, the space occupied by a respectable shop. But they both knew where it had been. "You remember?" Nathan asked, holding her hand as they stood on the boardwalk. "Every detail," Lena replied. She was 54 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face marked by sun and smile lines. But she stood as straight and strong as she had at 22, and her eyes held the same fierce intelligence. "I remember the cold, the fear, the certainty that my life was over. And then I remember you stepping out of the crowd and seeing me when everyone else just saw merchandise." "I saw a queen in chains," Nathan said, "and I knew I could not walk away. Best decision you ever made. Second best." He smiled at her, his hair fully gray now, his face weathered by years of outdoor work, but his eyes still the same gray she had fallen in love with. "The best decision was asking you to marry me. I think my best decision was saying yes." They kissed there on the boardwalk, two old married people who loved each other as much at 56 and 54 as they had at 28 and 22. More, perhaps, because they had built a life together, weathered storms together, raised children together, chosen each other over and over again for 32 years. As they walked back to their wagon, Lena said, "You know what I am most grateful for?" "What?" "That I got to choose. After everything that happened, after all my choices were taken from me, I got them back. And I chose you and this life and everything we built. No one forced it on me. No one decided for me. It was mine to choose, and I chose well." "So did I," Nathan said, helping her into the wagon. "So did I." They drove home together through the Colorado landscape they had made their own, past the landmarks that marked their shared history. The spot where Nathan had taught Lena to dance in the snow, the meadow where James had been born, the creek where Caroline had learned to fish, the hillside where they picnicked every summer with the whole extended family. At the ranch, their children and grandchildren were gathering for the anniversary celebration. There would be food and music and laughter, stories told and retold, the comfortable chaos of a large, loving family. But first, Nathan and Lena took a moment alone on their porch, looking out at the land they had built their life on. "You have any regrets?" Lena asked. Nathan considered the question seriously, as he considered all her questions. "Not a one," he said finally. "Everything I have done, every choice I have made since that day in Julesburg has led to this moment. This life, you, our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, I would not change a single thing. Neither would I." Lena leaned against him, fitting into the curve of his arm like she had been made for it. Even the hard parts, the scary parts, the parts where I thought I might not survive, because they all led here to this moment with you. You think Rose will take over the ranch eventually?" Nathan asked, shifting gears to more practical matters. "James has his section, Caroline has her practice, but the main ranch will need someone to run it when we are gone." "We are not gone yet," Lena pointed out with amusement. "We have years left in us." "But yes, I think Rose will come home eventually. Photography is a passion, but the land is in her blood. She will come back when she is ready." She was right. Rose returned to the ranch in 1913 at the age of 23. Her photography skills now employed documenting the ranch and its operations, creating a visual history of their family and their work. She had married a quiet man named Thomas who loved the land as much as she did, and they took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch, allowing Nathan and Lena to slow down and enjoy their later years. Nathan and Lena spent their time with their grandchildren, teaching them the things they had taught their own children. They took long rides across the ranch they loved. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over land that would support their family for generations to come. In the summer of 1918, as the world was shaking itself apart in the Great War that had finally drawn in America, the Xaviers celebrated 40 years of marriage. All three of their children were there with their families, and friends came from miles around to honor the couple who had become a legend in their community. The story of Nathan buying Lena at auction and setting her free, of their unlikely love story, of the ranch and family they had built, had been told and retold until it had taken on mythic proportions. But for Nathan and Lena, it was simply their life. The choices they had made, the love they had nurtured, the family they had raised. Nothing mythic about it, just two people who had found each other when they needed it most and had decided to hold on tight. 40 years, Lena marveled as they danced at the celebration, moving to music played by James's eldest son on a fiddle. "Where did the time go?" "Into this," Nathan said, gesturing at the celebration around them, the children and grandchildren and friends, the ranch building standing solid against the Colorado sky, the land stretching out in all directions. Into building all of this. It was time well spent. The best. They danced until they were tired, then sat together and watched their family celebrate. Rose was taking photographs, capturing moments that would be cherished for generations. Caroline was telling stories, making everyone laugh with her animated retellings. James was discussing ranch business with his sons, already planning for the future. The grandchildren ran wild, supervised loosely by various adults, their laughter ringing across the yard. As the sun set and the party showed no signs of slowing, Nathan leaned over and whispered in Lena's ear, "Want to escape? Raid my mind." They slipped away as they had 40 years earlier on their wedding night, walking toward their cabin hand in hand. It had been expanded and improved over the years, but the bones of it were the same structure Nathan had built with his own hands in the years before he met Lena. Inside, they sat together on the bed that had been theirs for 40 years, and Nathan pulled Lena close. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing me, for staying, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I was difficult or stubborn or scared, for giving me a family and a purpose and a reason to keep going when things were hard, for being my partner in every sense of the word." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Nathan Xavier, you gave me all of that and more. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You gave me freedom and choice and love. You gave me children and a home and a place in the world. You saw me when I was at my lowest and decided I was worth saving. How could I not love you?" We saved each other, Nathan said, kissing her forehead. That is what I think. We were both lost, both broken in our own ways, and we found each other and helped each other heal. Then let us save each other a little longer, Lena said, smiling through her tears. I am not done with you yet, Nathan Xavier. Good, because I am nowhere near done with you either. They lay down together, still dressed in their celebration clothes, and talked quietly until sleep claimed them. Outside, their family continued to celebrate, but in the cabin, Nathan and Lena simply held each other, grateful for every day they had been given, grateful for the choice made on a snowy day 40 years ago that had changed both their lives forever. The years continued to roll by, bringing change and challenge, but also joy and growth. The ranch adapted to new technologies and new ways of doing business. Automobiles replaced wagons gradually. Electricity came to the area, and then telephones. The world that had seemed so wild and open when Nathan and Lena first married was becoming more civilized, more connected, more modern. But the essential things remained the same: family, hard work, the land, love that endured through seasons and years, and everything life threw at them. In 1925, Nathan and Lena celebrated their 47th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them on their porch. Nathan was 73 now, Lena 69. They moved more slowly than they once had, and various aches and pains had become familiar companions. But they were still sharp-minded and engaged with the world, still interested in their children's lives and their grandchildren's futures. You ever think about that day? Lena asked as they watched the sun set. The auction, often, Nathan admitted. Especially lately. I keep thinking about how close we came to never meeting. If I had gone to town a different day, if someone else had outbid me, if you had chosen to leave instead of staying, so many moments where it all could have gone differently. But it did not go differently. It went exactly as it was supposed to go. We found each other and we built this. Lena gestured at the ranch, at their life. That is what matters. You are right, as always. Nathan smiled at her, the smile that still made her heart skip after 47 years. Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You are slacking. Then let me make it 4. I love you, Lena Katherine Xavier. I have loved you since I first saw you standing in the snow, and I will love you until I take my last breath. And I love you, Nathan Xavier. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God for you every single day. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, holding hands the way they had held hands through 4 decades of marriage. They did not know how many more years they would have together, but they knew that whatever time remained, they would spend it as they had spent the previous 47 years. Together, partners in every sense, loving each other with the deep, abiding love that came from choosing each other over and over again. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1927, at the age of 75. Lena held his hand as he slipped away, telling him she loved him one last time, thanking him for their life together. The family gathered to mourn and to celebrate a life well lived, a man who had been a good husband, a loving father, a doting grandfather, and a pillar of his community. Lena grieved deeply, but not without hope. She had been blessed with 49 years of marriage to a man she loved beyond measure. They had built a legacy that would endure in their children and grandchildren, and the land they had stewarded so carefully. Nathan was gone from this world, but he lived on in everything they had created together. She remained on the ranch, supported by her children, actively involved in the operation until her own health began to fail. In the spring of 1930, at the age of 74, surrounded by her children and many of her grandchildren, Lena Katherine Xavier closed her eyes for the last time and slipped away to join her beloved husband. They buried her next to Nathan in the family cemetery on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple but elegant, marking the resting places of two people who had loved deeply and lived well. The ranch continued under the management of their children and grandchildren, growing and adapting with the times, but never losing the essential character that Nathan and Lena had instilled in it. The story of how it all began, with a cowboy buying a scarred woman at an auction in the snow and seeing her beauty and strength when others saw only damaged goods, became family legend, passed down through generations. Every time the family gathered, which was often, someone would tell the story again. About Nathan stepping out of the crowd with his quiet courage. About Lena standing on the auction block with her fierce dignity. About the love that had grown between them, unexpected and powerful and enduring. About the life they had built from pain and hope, and the choice to keep choosing each other. And in the telling and retelling, Nathan and Lena Xavier lived on, their love story a testament to the power of seeing someone truly, of offering freedom instead of demanding control, of building something beautiful from the broken pieces of the past. They had found each other in the snow on a bitter day in 1878, and they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. A reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, love can bloom and thrive and change the world. The ranch still stands today, run by the great-great-grandchildren of Nathan and Lena Xavier, a thriving operation that honors the vision and values of its founders. On a hillside overlooking the land they loved, two simple headstones mark the resting places of a cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him in return. And if you stand there quietly and listen, you can almost hear the echo of their voices, talking and laughing and loving each other still. Their story woven permanently into the landscape they made their own.